Hi everyone, welcome. Today, I'll share my full process to paint the soft autumn landscape. I'll show you how to bring the glowing trees and calm reflections to life, and how using different textures can help create balance. So let's get started. You can find the full list of supplies in the description below. Let's begin with a simple sketch. I'm drawing the horizon line where the trees will sit. The right side comes a bit forward because those trees will be closer than the ones on the left. Then I'll lightly mark the position and size of the trees without too much detail. I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, but I like doing this just to avoid perspective mistakes. I'll show the final painting on screen to help you visualize it. Here go some mountains in the background. And a few small islands that will create a path on the lake to guide the viewer. Alright, now let's bring this scene to life. I'll start by wetting the paper, the entire surface except for the mountain on the left, since it will have some white areas. For the sky, I'm doing a simple wash of blue-gray. On the right side, I'll leave some gaps for the clouds, which I'll define soon using a paper towel. Next, I'll mix that blue with a touch of permanent rose and paint the sky along the horizon line. This part needs to be done while the paper is still wet. It's a one-layer sky. Now I'll tilt the paper up and down to get a nice, smooth blend. While the paint is still wet, I'll use a clean paper towel to lift some pigment and shape the upper edges of the clouds. Working very gently, one small section at a time. Now, moving on to the lake. Before you wet the paper, make sure the sky is completely dry. I actually skipped this step and a bloom almost ruined my painting. The lake will be painted in layers, and for the first one, I'm using the same colors as the sky. Of course, everything is inverted here because it's a reflection. And you don't need to mirror the clouds, since an island will sit at the bottom. For the second layer, if your paper starts drying, you can let it dry completely and then re-wet it before adding more paint. I'm using indigo to darken the bottom left and create a few gentle ripples. Then, with a clean, dry, fluffy brush, I'll carefully soften those ripples to keep them smooth and calm. Now let's paint the mountains. I'll only use two colors here, burnt sienna and ultramarine. Both are granulating pigments, so they will naturally separate a little and create beautiful texture. I'll wet the mountain area to get a soft look. I start shaping the mountain with light brush strokes that follow its slope, beginning at the top and gently pulling the brush downwards. This helps suggest form and texture without overpainting. Then, I use pure ultramarine to reinforce the shadows and bring a bit more depth. Now moving on to the land. I'll mix golden deep, burnt sienna and a touch of olive green. I'm wetting the right side of the land, being careful not to go past the pencil mark at the bottom. Here, I'm painting the distant shoreline with a steady, horizontal stroke. This part is on dry paper. On the right side, the upper area is wet while the lower part is dry, and I do this to have more control. I'll add more olive green here since this area is in shadow. And using a small brush, I darken the bottom even more to increase the sense of volume. Now, I'll show you how to paint a beautiful sequence of distant trees. First, I'm using golden deep and olive green for the first ones. I slightly wet the areas where the trees will be. Not too much, just enough for a soft edge. I start with the lighter yellowish tone and then add olive green to shape the shadows and create some depth. I'll repeat the process, but this time I'm adding a touch of permanent red light to the mix. These trees will look a bit different from the others, just enough to break the monotony and make the forest feel alive. For the rest of the trees, I'll use olive green as the base and add a little burnt sienna and Payne's gray to create subtle color shifts. Notice I don't completely mix the paints on the palette. I keep a gradient of colors and let them blend as I go. I'll start by wetting the area where the trees will be. Then, I begin laying a sequence of greens, varying the shades from warmer brownish tones to deeper greens, and so on. You don't need to follow my exact sequence here. Just trust your intuition. I'm circling that yellowish tree with darker colors to give it more shape and contrast. Then, I continue with the same process, carefully surrounding the orange trees. Now, with a flat brush, I'll soften the base of the trees to make them look more even and grounded. The brush should be damp, not too wet. I'm also adjusting the tops of a few trees that ended up with a strange shape. If you enjoy delicate paintings like I do, there are more tutorials like these coming. So please don't forget to subscribe. And stay until the end, I have something special to show you. Now I'm carefully adding small touches of darker color to give more shape to the trees. For the middle trees, I'll use a mix of olive green and permanent red light, golden deep and green gold, golden deep and permanent red light, and a little accent of permanent rose. Next, I'll wet the paper, trying to keep things as tidy as possible, and gently spread the water with a soft brush. I'll start laying the color mixes on the wet surface, varying the shapes and shades to create form and contrast. Again, I don't fully mix the paints on the palette. I let the colors blend naturally on the paper. As we move to the right, the trees get larger since they're closer to the viewer. I'm adding some darker trees in the background to help define the lighter ones in the front. That way, we get the illusion of individual trees without much effort, instead of just a big, blurry mess of color. See how we can still get beautiful shapes even while working on wet. This is one of my favorite techniques. If your paint spreads too much, it means either your paper is too wet or your paint is too watery. On this side, we'll have a different group of trees, tall and elegant ones. For the treetops, I'm using a mix of olive green and permanent red light. The background has a warm yellowish tone, and I'm adding ultramarine to paint the shadows and add contrast. Now I'll use a small flat brush with firm bristles to lift some paint and suggest the tree trunks. I make sure to clean the brush every time I lift so it doesn't leave any unwanted marks. Sometimes I go over the same spots again to remove a bit more paint and make the trunks stand out. I feel this area needs a few more trees, so I gently wet the surface before adding them to keep the edges soft and natural. Whenever I re-wet the paper, I always make sure it's completely dry underneath. I want to intensify this group of trees, so I'll repeat the same process once more. Finally, let's paint the main tree. This part will be done on dry paper. I'll start with a yellowish tone on the top, using the side of my brush to keep the edges loose and broken. Then I add a touch of clean water in the center to bring some lightness. Next, I'm mixing a bit of permanent red light to shift the color slightly and build volume. I can almost feel the sunlight on the horizon, even though I'm indoors right now. That's the power of color temperature and values. Now I mix Payne's Gray and permanent red light to add the shadows. And my brush strokes will follow the natural tilt of the tree. This helps to suggest its leaning shape and give it a more organic feel. I'll carefully re-wet the dry paper, because I feel this side needs a bit more depth. I'm using ultramarine to cool down those warm tones while darkening them at the same time. That little shift helps the trees glow even more because the contrast in both color and value makes them stand out nicely. I'm also using a small brush with a darker mix to better define the edge between the trees and the ground. I'll do the same with the trees, adding more contrast on the right side of each trunk. I know it's a detailed work, but it's worth it. These small touches make the whole scene feel more real and lively. Finally, we'll start working on the reflections. Before that, I'm adding a bit more color to the lake because it got too light after drying. So, I'll apply a layer of blue-gray and toward the center I'll cool it down using permanent rose, mirroring the sky once again. I'll also add more indigo in the bottom left, moving my brush to suggest the ripples on the water. Once the paper is dry, I'll re-wet the lake to paint the reflections. I'll tilt the paper a little so the paint flows down slightly. Then I'll start laying the same colors as the trees above, using a flat brush. It doesn't have to match the exact shapes, we're just creating the illusion of a reflection. That's the magic of watercolor. Make short vertical strokes and let the colors blend and flow downward. Now I'll turn the paper completely vertical. And with a small flat brush, I'll start lifting some color from the reflection to make it look more like real water. I do this in different spots and lengths to keep it natural. Just remember to clean your brush every time you lift. And here I'm softening and straightening the edge because there's usually more light reflected near the shoreline. Now, I'll use a mix of burnt sienna and ultramarine to create a subtle reflection of the mountain on the right. I'm doing this on dry paper since the paint is very diluted. Then, just like before, I'll lift a bit of paint to soften the reflection. Let's move to the right side. I'll follow the same process as before. Laying the colors with a flat brush and letting the paint flow downward. I can darken the shadow areas a little to add contrast. Then I tilt the paper vertically again. And before it dries, I lift some paint here too to keep that watery look. I hope you're enjoying painting with me today. If you are, please give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow. And if you love soft and cozy watercolor landscapes, don't forget to subscribe so we can keep painting beautiful places together. Now I'll have olive green, burnt sienna and Payne's gray on my palette without mixing them completely. I'm painting the little island on the left on dry paper using a watery mix at first. Then I use the mix with Payne's gray to create shadows in some spots. Let's do this while the paint is still wet to get a soft look. This brush is a bit wild, but I want to try some different textures on the bushes. Okay, back to my usual brush. I try different brush strokes, different brush sizes, and I keep varying the shades. This part is very spontaneous. You don't need to copy it. Try to make your own thing. Use your imagination. You can add more contrast here and there or try some lifting. Grass and vegetation are great for practicing textures. Now I'll carefully wet the area below the little island to paint its reflection. I tilt the paper and lay the colors with a flat brush. I'll tell you something. I used to rush my paintings because of tight schedules and tons of things to do. But then I ruined a lot of them because I was missing the flow and energy of the scene. Watercolor rewards patience. It's more than technique, it's sensitivity. It needs time to flow and settle down. And when it does, it creates beautiful connections between the colors, the water, and the paper itself. And besides, how could I ever convey calmness if I'm in a rush, right? Again, I'm trying to mirror the elements above, but without too much detail. Reflections have their own mystery. I lift some paint with the flat brush again, but this time I won't make horizontal strokes. I'll follow the island's curves instead. For the last island, I'll do a similar process. I'm using darker colors here since the foreground is in shadow. This part is really fun to paint. There's plenty of room to explore and play with textures. I add darker tones to build the shadows. Then sprinkle some sea salt. It's table salt you have in the kitchen. Now, let's try a few strokes with the wild brush. You can't deny it's fun. Bit by bit, all this vegetation comes to life. These little islands in the foreground don't have many colors, but they're rich in texture, and that helps break the monotony. Keep an eye on the contrast, even though this area is already darker. We can still see touches of light and texture. And notice how your eyes travel from the lake in the shadows toward the bright horizon. Well, the salt effect is starting to show. I'll just lift a little bit to intensify this effect. Just a few touches and our work is done. Now, there's something I'd like to share with you. Starting from this tutorial, I'll be featuring subscribers' versions of my YouTube paintings in the Cozy Community Gallery. This month, we have Anna's beautiful artwork of the cozy house at sunset. Thank you so much, Anna, for sharing it with us. I really love it. If you'd like to share your work too, just tag me on Instagram at dri.cozy.art. See you in my next video.